Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a flat portrait icon in Illustrator. Before we get started with this video tutorial, let's look and see what it is that we're going to do. This is the icon that we're going to create in this tutorial, this portrait icon. But the same process can give you lots of different looks. Here's another sort of icon that you could create and another one. This one's a lot quirkier than this one, which is a little bit more staid and a little bit more realistic, if you like, for a flat icon. But you can create all sorts of effects here. You don't need to be able to draw. This is not a drawing exercise, interestingly enough. It really just is a shape building exercise. And if you can build shapes in Illustrator, then you can make portrait icons just like this. To get started with our portrait, we're going to create a new document. I'm just going to create a standard square document, 600 by 600 pixels in size. I'm using RGB color mode. You can make your document any size that you like. So I'm just going to unfloat this because I really don't like the way my documents get tabbed. So let's get me happy to start off with Control 0 to just make everything square inside the artboard. So we're going to start with the body of our person. I'm going to use the pen tool, but I really encourage you to try the pen tool even if you've not used it very much before, because I'm going to show you some techniques for making sure that you can make it work exactly the way you want it to. So I'm going to click here in the middle of the document, just clicking once. I'm going to hold the Shift key and click again, and that's going to give me a straight base here. Now I'm going to draw her shoulders, and what I want to do is to peg roughly where I want the curve to be. So I think I want it about here, so I'm going to click and drag at this point to make the curve. And I'm mindful that this is sort of where I want the center of the document to be, although that is flexible. If I make a mess of it, I can easily fix it. I'm going to click here to pin the base of the neck, and then I'm just going to go up here to finish off the neck, just slightly out at this point. Now I'm going to hold the Shift key as I click here and then click again. So I've got this sort of closed shape, which is basically going to be my body shape. Now I'm going to select a skin color at this point, so I'm just going to click on sort of orange to start off with, and then go over here to peg some sort of skin color to use. And I'm going to remove the stroke from this shape. I think I want this to be a little bit pinker if I can. Okay, a little bit happier with that. So this is the basic neck shape. The next thing I'm going to do is to prepare some clothing. So again, I'm going to go to the pen tool. I want the clothes to be a sort of little shirt here. So I'm going to start here where I think the middle of the shirt is going to be, the sort of neckline. So I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to drag in a horizontal direction because I want to create a curve, and this is a good start to my curve. I'm going to come up to where I want the clothing to be. Now it's going to extend a little bit beyond the shoulder because that's what clothing does. I'm going to click and drag at this point to round this off a little bit. And I want this to come fairly straight down here. I'm going to need to fix that in a minute. So I'm just going to click here. And I'm going to click around to create this shape. And it's going to be a little easier if we actually color this shape in. So let's have a look and see what we've got. I'm liking everything except this point up here. So I'm just going to click on the direct selection tool, select this, and go and make this a sort of tighter bend here. I think I might bring it in a little bit and then make this a little bit flatter. To move these handles independently of each other, just going to hold the Alt or Option key as I do it. You want to make sure though that you get this little plus sign by the handle and that you don't get the double arrows, because if you get the double arrows, that means that you're making a copy and you just want to undo that and start over again. So there's the basics of the clothing that I'm going to be using. Let's just give it a slightly better color here. I think we'll go for a green color. Now I want to cut off the clothing so it doesn't extend any further beyond the body. So I'm going to, first of all, just duplicate the body by alt dragging a copy of it away. That just tucks a piece out of the way here, and we're going to now cut this up. So I'm going to the layers palette, and I just want to see where these pieces are relative to each other. Just going to drag this down. So I've got the green fabric on top and the skin that I'm using underneath. What I want to do is to be able to remove this piece. The easiest way is probably to use the Pathfinder tool and to use this option here, divide. And what that does is to just break this up into lots of little pieces. So I'm going to click divide, and then I'm going to choose object, ungroup, because I want to ungroup the pieces. I don't want this piece, so I'm going to take it away. I don't want the body because I've got a body left, but I do want these pieces, although it's now two pieces because it was broken up by the body underneath. So with the clothing now selected, I'm going to unify it again. So now I have the shirt piece and I've got the skin that goes with it. So I'm going to line these up and just reverse their order in the layers palette. I'm going to make sure that their right sides align. So I'll just click here to make their right sides align, and then the bottom edges align. Having done that, we can then flip this and copy it to create the other side of our body. So I'll choose Object, Transform, Reflect, and I want to reflect it on the vertical, but I also want to make a copy of it. So with Preview turned on, I can see how it's going to be reflected, which is the correct reflection. I'll click Copy to make a duplicate, and now I've got the second part of the body. Now it's too wide, but that's solvable because I can just bring this shape back on top of the other one. The neckline is not ideal, but if I join these two pieces together, I'm going to get a reasonable shaped piece of clothing, and I've got a reasonable shaped sort of neck. So we're ready now to go ahead and create the head. For the head, I'm going to use the ellipse tool, so I'm just going to grab that and then drag out a large ellipse, and then just move it roughly into position. Now obviously the skin tone's not correct, but let's just work at the shape here. I'm going to click on the topmost point here and just bring it down just to flatten the top of the head. If I hold the shift key as I do that, it's just going to be constrained in how it's drawn and just be dragged in the downwards direction. I'm going to grab this point and drag it down a little bit just to create more of a sort of teardrop shape for the face. Now I'm going to use the Move tool, pressing the letter V, to just move it into position. And if I need to, I can resize it at this point. Now we want to make sure we center this, but at the moment we've got two pieces of body underneath, so I'm actually going to join those together. So I'm going to grab the two body pieces and use the Unite command here on the Pathfinder to make a single body piece. That's going to make it easier to center everything because I can select the body and the head and everything gets nicely centered. Now I want the body face color to be the same as the skin color, so I'm just going to click the eyedropper tool here and just pick up the skin color. Nice easy way of doing that. Now I want to make some shading under the chin, and to do that I'm going to need a copy of the face and the body to work with. So I'm going to select both pieces, the face and the body, and I'm going to copy them, edit copy. I could press Control C if I wanted to. Now I'm just going to work out in this area so that I can be independent of the main object that I'm working with. So I'm just going to click here and choose Edit Paste or Control V. Now what I want to do right now is to remove the head from the body. So I'm going to click on the head, it's above the body, click on the body, and from the Pathfinder I'm going to use Subtract or Minus Front. And that removes the head from the body. So I get the curve of the chin at this point. Now I'm going to Alt drag a second version of the neck away. And this is going to overlap because there's a slight curve in the neck. You can see that the front part of the neck here, the duplicate, is actually larger than the back, and that's going to really stand me in good stead. If it were not, I would probably just enlarge this piece a little bit so that I got a clear cut off. Now I'm going to select both these pieces and I'm going to break them up. I can do that in a number of ways, but probably the easiest again is just going to be using this divide tool and then choose Object Ungroup, because that just ungroups this into lots of pieces and you can just remove the bits that you don't want, which is all of these. And this is the bit I do want, but it looks like it's got a few strays. So let's just zoom in here and see what we've got. Well, these are the two bits that I also don't want. So let's go and grab those. Everything's come out nice and clean. If it hadn't, you could use the eraser or you could start chopping bits off using the Pathfinder, but everything's pretty good for me here. So I'm going to press Control 0 to see everything more clearly. I'm going to double click on this color here because I want a darker version of the skin tone for my shadow. Now I'm just going to move it into position. It's just going to lock into position there because it's exactly a piece that was cut out of the neck, so it's going to fit perfectly. I'm just going to dial down the opacity though a little bit. I think it's a little bit too dark. So now we've got our chin shadow. We're ready to go ahead and to create the facial features. Now for the facial features, I'm going to start building up the eyes, and I find it a little bit easier to build them up independently of the body. So I'm going to just draw out a filled blue rectangle here. We're going to build the eye up on it. So I'm just going to zoom into this. And we're going to start with a ellipse. I'm going to drag that out for the eyeball. I want to invert this, so I want it filled with white and I don't want any stroke on it at this stage at all. And now click the direct selection tool so that we can make the very ends of this eye sort of pointy, so we get a sort of almond shape eye. Having done that, we can then reshape the eye, so you can make it narrower if you want to, and you can also rotate it. So I'm going to make mine slightly angled here. The next thing we're going to do is create the iris for the eye. So I'm just going to drag out a circle holding the Shift key as I do that. You can make yours as large as the eye, you can make it bigger than the eye, or you can make it smaller. And I'm going to place mine about like this. So I want a slight area underneath the eye, but I want an overlap over here. And I'm going to fill it with a color. So right now I'm going to fill it with black. And I don't want any stroke at all. And so next I'm going to add a small highlight. I'm just going to shift drag in here and we're going to create a small highlight that'll be filled with white. And that wants to be well inside the eye here. So I have a small problem and I have a piece of black extending beyond the edge of the eye, and what I need to do is to cut this down. So I'm going to click here on this eyeball, and I also want the white of the eye, but I want a duplicate of this. So I'm going to choose or press Command or Control C to copy it, and then I'm going to choose Edit, Paste in Place, because I want a second version right on top of the first. Now I'm going to select the black part of the eye and this white in the front, and I'm going to use the Pathfinder, and what I want to do is to keep the piece where these two shapes intersect. So I'm just going to click there on the intersection, and that keeps this black filled shape. Well, it's white filled right now, but it is cut off. You can see the top of it has been cut off. So I'm just going to click here to fill it with black. And then here in my Paths palette, this is the small white highlight because it's not disappearing when I turn it on or off. So I'm just going to drag it just above there. So there's the basic eye shape. At this point, if you want to, you can add some sort of stroke around the eye. So you can grab the white of the eye and then go and add a stroke. This is a sort of even stroke, it's even all the way around, but if you wanted to, you could create a non-uniform stroke by, for example, selecting one of these different width profiles. And they're going to have a different effect on the eye. So I'm just going to choose one of those for now. Let's go back pressing Control or Command 0 to see where we are. Well, I don't need this blue piece any longer, so I can get rid of it. And now I'm going to grab my eye and I'm going to group it, Object Group. That's a really good tool to use because it means that the eye is going to travel all as one piece and you're going to lose bits of it as you move around. So I'm going to put it in position. I think it's a bit too big, so I'm just going to size it down a little bit. And then I'm going to Alt drag a duplicate of it away. Now, because it's got a sort of twist on it, we're going to need to twist this eye. So I'm going to need to rotate it back the other direction. I'm going to align the tops of these. I'm going to just move them into position. They can be moved again later on if I want to. Now, if I group these by choosing Object Group, so I group both eyes, then I can choose the eye and all the rest of the body pieces and just center everything by clicking on the center button. That makes sure that everything's nice and centered. Now for the nose, I'm just going to use 2 small dots. I'm going to zoom in here so I can see basically where I'm working. I'm going to use the ellipse tool. I'm going to select a slightly darker tone than the skin tone by just dragging down and slightly inwards here. And I'm going to just shift drag 2 nostrils. Well, shift drag 1 nostril and then Alt or Option drag a duplicate away from the original. I'm going to make sure that these are aligned to the top. I'm going to move them down a little bit. If I group them, then when we press Control 0 to go back up, we can make sure that they're centered along with everything else by clicking on the center button. Next thing is the lips. Again, I like to do those independently, so I'm not too worried about size while I'm actually creating the lips. I'm going to do that with the pen tool. I'm just going to select a sort of red color for now so that we've got something that sort of looks like lips as we're drawing them. So I'm going to start in the middle and I'm going to drag in this sort of direction because I want to come around and over. I'm going to click about here to create the sort of bendy part of the lip and then out here to create the furthest reach of the mouth. And then back here directly under the starting point to create the bottom of the lip. Now that is actually a single shape that can then be duplicated, rotated and joined back up again, and that's probably the easiest way to get a nice symmetrical lip. So I'm going to select this, I'm going to choose Object, Transform, Reflect. I'm going to reflect it vertically, but I want to make a copy, so I've got 2 of these. So now I can just go and join them together. I'm going to place them so that they are properly aligned. I'm going to move them so that they're pretty much over the top of each other. Yep, looks like they're pretty good here. Now I'm going to select these 2 points here. So now we're going to join these and we're going to choose Object, Path, Join. Then we're going to come down here and do the same thing. Object, Path, Join. That just creates a single path from this joined object. I think I've got a little bit happening here that I don't want. I've got 2 points almost on top of each other but not quite. So I'm going to select both of them. I'm going to choose Object, Path, Average. And then from the dialog which appears, I'm going to average both. And what that does is it just places these 2 directly on top of each other. So now let's just zoom back out again. I'm going to flip the colors here so that the mouth is filled with color. So there's my mouse, so let's press Control 0 to see everything and let's just go and move it into position. And again, whenever I draw a mouth that I really like, I'm going to add this to my symbol so I can grab it again in future. I think this is a bit big, so I can just alter its size. Okay, she needs some eyebrows pretty desperately, so let's go and add the eyebrows. These are something I will generally draw in position. So again, using the pen tool, I'm just going to start here, heading in the direction I want to end up in, and pretty much lined up with the side of the eye. I'm just going to curve this around. Press Control to deselect that, and then just go and select the shape that I created. Now I want to stroke it, so I'm just going to make sure I have the stroke here. I'm going to add some color to it, and then I'm going to use one of these brush profiles and probably just increase it a little bit. Let's zoom out with Control 0 to see what it looks like. Not totally happy with that, so let's just zoom back in again and fix the end of it, which is way too curved under. If you find that you're selecting the wrong thing at any point, just press Control Z and you'll just stop selecting it. It just undoes what you've just done. It's pretty easy when these back pieces like the face is not locked down. It's pretty easy to do the wrong thing, so just be aware of that. Okay, that's looking reasonable. Let's duplicate it. Just going to Alt drag a duplicate away from the original, and I'm just going to flip it with Object, Transform, Reflect, OK. Don't want to create a copy at that point because I already had my copy made. Okay, so we're going to pin in the ears or add some ears just in case the hair does not cover the face properly. So just going to start drawing in ears here. Now, ears don't have to be rocket science at all, because probably what we're going to do is just completely cover them up anyway. But if we don't, at least we've got something happening here. So I'm just going to move it into position, and then I'm going to recolor it by clicking on the eyedropper and clicking on the face so that the ear is colored the same color as the face. Okay, now that I've got one ear, I'm going to select it, Object, Transform, Reflect. In this case, I do want to make a copy. I want to reflect it vertically. Pretty much everything is reflected vertically. And I want to make a copy. So there's my copy, and let's just take it across here. And we just want to position it pretty much in the same place on the other side. So I want to line these pieces up with each other. As I said, we probably won't be even using the ears, but just in case we need them, they're there. Now we're ready to create the hair, so I'm going to switch these around so that I have brown as my stroke color, so that when I draw with the pen tool, I'm going to see the hair as I draw it. Now you can draw symmetrical hair or you can draw asymmetrical hair. I'm going to draw mine slightly asymmetrical, so I'm going to click here and head off in the direction that I plan to travel in. And I'm just going to click and drag around her face to draw the hair in. I'm going to try and avoid the line between the chin and the neck, because if I get into that territory, I'm going to have a lot of cleaning up to do. And it's just easier at this stage when you're starting out to avoid obvious problems. So I'm just going to click here. Her hair is always going to be slightly bigger than her scalp, and just click again. And I can just flip these when I've done that so that I can see what the hair's looking like, and then come in and then make some adjustments to it. When you're working, you want to make sure that if you are trying to just adjust a particular point, that you have that point selected and that you don't take off with her entire head of hair in the process. Now I've got a point in there that I can't get access to, so I'm just going to zoom in to see what's causing the problem here. There doesn't seem to be a second handle on this point, so I'm just going to click on this tool here, which adds a second handle to the point. Again, I want to make sure that I'm just working with this point and not about to take all of her hair with me when I'm going. You want to zoom in and out as you work just to make sure that you've got a good line for her hair and that it's doing the things that you want it to do. Once you've got one side of her hair created, you can go and do the second side. I like to overlap these a little bit so I make sure that I get a nice sort of part happening. Again, heading off in the direction I plan to travel in. This time I've got fill turned on, so it's going to be a bit of a nuisance to see what's happening, but you can always undo it and start over if you find it annoying to have fill turned on. Once you've created the basic hair, you can just come in and fine tune it, just making sure that you're working with the hair and you're not pulling other pieces of the face out of the way as you're doing that. If you're having problems, just lock these pieces down. You can lock everything down but the hair, and that way you can only select the hair and you won't keep moving pieces around that you don't mean to move. Now we've got the hair in place, and the next thing I'm going to do is to show you how to add some shading to the face. Now there are lots of different ways that you can add shading to the face, and one of the ways that I like to do is to add a sort of organic shading. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I've unlocked everything, and now I'm going to go and select the entire image, and I want to make a duplicate of everything. So I'm just going to choose edit copy, and I'm going to choose edit paste because I don't want this to be pasted in place. I want it out here somewhere, and I'm going to join all of these pieces together. So I'm just going to click on unite. Now I could have chosen individual pieces that would have made up the body, but it's just easier to grab everything. So at this point, I'm going to change the opacity of this layer right down. And I've chosen a sort of brown fill, because that was the color, but it's not actually going to be a bad color to use. So I'm going to put this back on top of the original piece. And again, I think the opacity is a bit high, so I'm going to go down to probably around about 10%. And now what I want to do is to grab an organic shape through her face. So I'm going to choose the pen tool. I'm going to make sure that I have a fill color selected, and I'm going to use probably a fairly obvious fill color like red. And I'm just going to start dragging through her along interesting lines. So I'm thinking probably something like this. I'm going to come through this point of her hair. I'm going to drag down here, sort of imagining a nose line here. And then perhaps swinging out to here. Now, this area over this side is the area I want to remove, so I'm actually going to click all the way around over here to create a shape that covers this side of her face. I'm going to control click away from it so that I actually have this shape created. What I want to do with this shape is to subtract it from that overlay that I created that was this darker version of her face. Let's just go and change up the opacity of this piece so that we can see exactly what we're going to do. And I'm going to change its fill color too so that we can see it. Okay, so I've got this filled in version of her and I've got this organic shape over the top, and I'm going to select both these pieces and I want to subtract this organic shape from the shape underneath. So I'm just going to choose subtract front or minus front, which is this option here. And that cuts this piece. So now I've got a shaded area and an unshaded area. And all I need to do is to go back to this shaded area and just dial this opacity all the way down. And you can change its color, you can do whatever you like with it, but this just gives the face just an interesting sort of organic shading through it. You can make the shape of the shading anything you like, and of course if you don't like it, you just turn it off and you've got your face back again. Now there are pieces of this face that you may want to save. You may want to, having spent time on the eyes and the mouth, for example, they're pieces that will save you a lot of time later on if you were just to save them in another document or save them as symbols so you can just bring them in anytime you need to use them in future. Now another thing that you may want to do is you may want to crop this to a circle. So I'm just going to go in and get the ellipse tool. I'm going to set the stroke for the ellipse. I'm going to drag out an ellipse and just position it over my portrait here. I'm going to move it pretty much centrally in position, and then because this is the topmost path, if I select all the objects in this particular layer and choose Object Clipping Mask Make, then we've clipped all the items below to this sort of circular shape, and so that we've got it cut out into a nice circle. And if we wanted to, we could put a filled circle behind it, all sorts of things that we could create. I'm just going to try and recreate that circle that I just had. It would have been easier to have duplicated the circle while I had it, but let's just try and do nearly what we had there. And I'm just going to add a stroke to it. Let's give it a decent size stroke at this point and give it a different color. So there are some of the things that you can do creating flat portraits in Illustrator. I'm sure that you're going to have a lot of fun with this, and you really don't need to be able to draw to create these. They're very simple to do. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more video tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com, where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.